Full disclaimer here, I believe that Nick Saban is the best. I don't think there's much disputing that, but how do the rest of the coaches in the SEC line up behind him, and is anyone on his heels? We got Brent Beard on the line from First Coast News to talk up the SEC coaches and give us our coaches rankings for 2020. Brent, how you doing today?
Mark, I'm doing well. First of all, a happy birthday this week, young man. So you probably haven't reached the stage that the rest of us have where we start counting backwards. And I'm sure your kids have reminded you many times this week of how old you are, as I have two 20-somethings, and they're only too happy to let me know how old I am when it comes time to birthday. So my friend, always glad to be with you.
Mine are now 21 and 23, and I had dinner with them last night. It was a great dinner, but they certainly had a few old jokes to,
I'm sure they did.
With.
Yes.
No question about that. So this is a league that for easily the last 15 years has produced the best players, the best talent. When the league has taken just a slight dip, maybe it's been because of coaching deficiencies in certain spots, but the coaching ranks seem rather fortified at this point, Brent. I think the coaching situation at most of these schools is in really good shape. And some of the guys that I've ranked 1 through 14, even if we get down to the lower ranks of 10 to 14, let's say, are still what I consider to be very capable, competent guys.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And listen, I think you could have made an argument not too long ago that SEC had better basketball coaches than they did football coaches. And part of the issue with the football coaches is just, for instance, a guy like Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee that I think is going to be a really fine football coach, but he just really hasn't proven it on the field yet. So the jury's still out as far as he is concerned. But certainly in your upper echelon, I don't think there's any doubt that they have solidified that group. And it's a much better group than we've had over the last few years.
So what does your top 5 look like, Brent?
Well, I'm obviously Saban's number 1, and we probably don't need to hash out the championships and the record. But I do want to say this about Saban. The reason I've got him number 1, and he proved this again this year, is because after Scott Cochran left, a lot of people thought, well, the program is going down, and we don't know where that's going. Then he hires 2 of the cutting edge guys who are from the Midwest in Indiana, and they've proven to be, at least what we know right now, I think much anticipated as far as their individual expertise, dealing with injuries. And let's be honest about this. Alabama the last 3 years has really been hurt with these injury situations, particularly on defense and a linebacker. There have been a slew of injuries. Then Moses comes back this year. So I think, Mark, the point that I wanted to make quickly about Saban is it's not just what he does on the field, but it's what he does within his staff and being able to stay somewhat ahead of the curve and what he needs to do. And it shows all the time, doesn't it?
Well, I think, Brent, that we would both agree that at the collegiate level, especially, that the teams take on the personality of the coach and they take on the characteristics. And Saban took all sorts of criticism following that championship defeat 2 years ago to Clemson in resounding fashion. What I brought to the table at that point in a counterpoint was that this is such an aberration. Think about, yeah, he's not won every important bowl game. He's not won every champ. Well, we can pretty much stop there. When he goes to a national championship game, he wins.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, he has had a few losses in big bowl games, but everyone does. But his postseason record is ridiculously good. Yeah. He has time to prepare a team. And even when he loses, it's got to be a kick 6 or some crazy play. Or fight down to the finish. His teams are always prepared, and his teams play with poise. They play with great fundamentals and technique, great discipline, great determination, and I think that they just mirror his tremendous abilities on the sideline.
My number 2 guy is Ed Orgeron of LSU, and I'm going to give a caveat for this. And my caveat is for the here and the now, which is why we're doing this. I would have Ed as the number 2 because of what he's done at LSU. Mark, I think he's learned from Southern Cal. I think he's learned from Ole Miss. I think what O has done, even more than jogging around with no shirt in the middle of the downtown Baton Rouge, is to be able to he loves the school loves him. He has proved to be an elite recruiter in a lot of ways. My question on O is going to be, can he do what Saban has done in longevity over the course of time to continue to win championships? Or, Mark, was last year your perfect storm that came together for LSU, and will this happen again?
Yeah, we of course know it's LSU and that the top 5 to 10 talent in the nation is coming to Baton Rouge, and it did with Les Miles, and it certainly will with Coach Orgeron. But at the same time, they were losing 3 and 4 games between that championship game appearance in 2011 and last season. Strip away Brady, strip away Burrow, and we'll see if that was a one championship shot for LSU or if this is the beginning of a bit of a dynasty and tussle with Alabama for the SEC. Where do we go at number 3?
Number 3, I'm going with Dan Mullen of Florida. And I know Dan Mullen has not won a championship yet, but I'll be frank with you. I do think that's coming. I think what he did at Mississippi State in developing talent that we've seen in the NFL and what he has done very quickly at Florida, he's 21-5. Mark, I can tell you the excitement level for Gator football right now is off the charts. That they are really expecting this year to beat Georgia and to go to Atlanta. I'm not saying that's going to happen yet, but I think the excitement that he has done in developing quarterbacks with what he did last year with Kyle Trask and galvanizing this Gator fan base is to me just absolutely amazing. And Florida football, easily since Urban Meyer was the coach here, has drawn the greatest excitement at this point that I've seen, Mark, in quite a while.
Yeah, and we'll get, of course, the rundown of my rankings, and you can poke holes in them, but I was certainly interested past Orgeron at 2 to hear where it went from there. So who do we have at number 4?
Number 4, I've got Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. And frankly, I've always been enamored with, do you win championships? Jimbo does have one at FSU. Now, if you ask FSU fans right now about Jimbo, you probably would not get a real a wonderful answer from them by any stretch of the imagination. But, Mark, isn't this a crucial year for Jimbo at A&M? I mean, this is year 3. A&M beat writers have told us that they basically told him, the upper echelon administration, look, we know you need 2 years to get your roster together. Now this year's, you've got Kellen Mond, who is supposed to be, at least in terms of being a veteran, the best quarterback in the league. That's still up in the air. He does a great job in recruiting. I think bringing Elko in as the coordinator has certainly helped at this point too. But let's also be honest, he needs a signature year this year. They and some beat writers are saying right now, Mark, they may be undefeated 10-0 going to Tuscaloosa to play Bama in late November. And Bama's got A&M, and then they've gone Auburn in the year, which is quite a pair, to say the least. So, and look, I think Fisher's a good coach. As you know, Mark, he's hard on his quarterbacks. He's 17-9 at A&M. They have shown some great potential, all in all, but isn't it time to go past that potential moniker and to either come back with a championship or at least be playing for one in late November, right?
And that's why defenders of Jim Harbaugh currently, Mark Richt, when he was let go at Georgia, Les Miles at LSU, will say, hey, the guy's winning 9 or 10 games a year. And isn't that a capable job? Yes. Nobody that knows anything is discounting their abilities. But Jimbo Fisher, sure, he could set up shop at Texas A&M, go 9-3, 10-2 every year with all that Texas talent, and he's a capable coach, but he's being paid to win championships. So that's going to have to be what the deal is, and that's his standard.
Absolutely. And my number 5 guy is Kirby Smart of Georgia, who has proven to be an elite recruiter. I think he's got a tremendous roster that they have built, and I think that's why, in my opinion, right now, Georgia would still have to be favored over Florida because I think they've got the better roster, and I think they've got maybe another elite defense. He has won SEC titles. The expectations on Mark are being ramped up at this point. I salute him for making changes in his staff. I think after last year, the walking down the hall and hiring a coordinator bit does not work all the time. Especially on offense. So Todd Monken comes in. You've got Jamie Newman coming over from Wake Forest. Certainly rumors now about the former USC quarterback maybe coming aboard. Will he be eligible in 2020? We don't know. But all the way around, Mark Richt, I love Mark Richt. I love the message that he had in his life of being a Christian and what that meant. I also understand, in talking to Georgia beat writers, the struggles that he had in big games that I do. And even though the record is close between he and Kirby, I still give Kirby the credit for putting Georgia on another level at this point. And to me, frankly, they're still just a bit away from winning a national championship, which I can certainly see them being back in the game, Mark. Can you, in the next 2 or 3 years?
And the distinction that you make is the same one I've made a number of times. Mark Richt had a really good run at Georgia, and that was certainly a top 10 to 15 program that he established. And a lot of younger college football fans think, oh, well, you're the coach at Georgia, you should win. They don't realize that there were some rough spots with the likes of Donnan and Goff for a number of years at Georgia. So it's not automatic. So what Mark Richt did, and I believe finishing in the top 10 like 9 times in 15 years, was pretty darn good. By the luck of the draw or the unlucky draw, 2012 could have been a championship. 2000, I believe, 5, 7, a number of years could have been championships and were not. Sure. And he just didn't get it done. And once you know, as well as I do, if not better, once you can notch that one national championship, that just speaks volumes, and people suddenly put you in a different category. But again, 10 to 15 in that range as a program. And I think Kirby Smart, as you alluded to, has elevated it to more like top 5 status.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And listen, I've got to add as maybe 5B, but we'll say 6 just to say it. I really like Mark Stoops of Kentucky. I like what he has done. And look, in my opinion, if he stays there much longer, and believe me, Mark, Florida State looked at him very seriously as a replacement for Willie Taggart. And that would have been a tremendous hire. But what Stoops has done at Kentucky and beating Florida, being in consistent bowl games, see, the impressive thing for him is he's recruited the state of Ohio. He decided, look, we're not probably going to win a lot of these games by going head-to-head and recruiting in Georgia, Alabama, Florida, and Texas. And I'm not saying they're not recruiting those states, but he's had a lot of success going to Ohio and recruiting there and being able to win last year with Bowden as quarterback, who basically is a glorified wide receiver, is unbelievable. So, Mark, I think the world of Mark Stoops. I think he has done a great job at Kentucky. And I'll be honest with you, it was tough for me to leave him out of my top 5.
No, I think it's a great call. And as I run down my list, 14 up to number 1, certainly I'll touch upon some points that you've touched on as well. I'm not necessarily taking legacy into account. Obviously, Nick Saban is just as good a coach today as he was in winning a 2009 national championship. But if we had a Joe Paterno or Bobby Bowden circa 2008, even though they are all-time greats, I wouldn't be putting them at the top of my list because they had lost their fastball at that point in the game. So I'm dealing with who would I hire right now to run my program. Secondly, of course, to win at Vandy versus to win at LSU are 2 different deals. Yeah. So I try to take the challenges into account, certainly, and the standard is going to be different. And when you've got a new coach like we do with Arkansas's Sam Pittman, I'm going to give him kind of a neutral grade. We don't know what he is as a head coach. And so anybody I rank, so I'm going to tend to rank those guys at the bottom of the league, unless I believe that somebody's underachieving, and I'm going to rank them below that particular place. So let's start at number 14, and I've got Derrick Mason of Vanderbilt. And despite the challenges, and hardly anybody ever wins at Vandy, and they've got a unique position in football and taking on that conference at an academic oriented institution, just considering what James Franklin was able to accomplish in going 9-4, 9-4, 2 consecutive years at Vandy, and Derrick Mason taking over that roster, I just don't think he's done a very good job of holding that up. He's been there for 6 years now. He did get to a couple bowl games, Brent, and then right off of it, he goes 3-9, 1-7 last year, and he's won 10 games out of 48 in the SEC.
I think what kept his job recently was that run against Tennessee, wasn't it, Mark, where they were able to win multiple games against, and albeit Tennessee was down, but still that's their great rival, and for them to be able to win that game was important. I like Mason. I always have. That I know at times they have struggled on offense. Now obviously they have a female athletic director now who I think frankly would do a very good job, because I thought she was a really good hire, to be honest with you. But Mark, you and I have been in this business long enough to know anytime you have a new AD, you never really know where that's going to go, do you?
No, not at all. And especially when that head coach, of course, was not that person's selection. So at number 13, I've got Sam Pittman. I just alluded to, I've given him a neutral grade because he's just starting on the job. I do expect him to toughen up that football team. He's got a reputation for being a hard-nosed, no-nonsense kind of guy, 58 years old, so he's been around the block. Of course, did a fine job in building one of the elite offensive lines at Georgia. Number 12, Brent, I've got Eli Drinkwitz. He's in that line of successful App State coaches who now move on to the next level. Of course, we had Scott Satterfield most recently at Louisville. His one campaign as a head coach, 12-1, wins the Sun Belt Conference. But again, he's in that procession, so you don't know how good he is, but had successful offensive coordinator stays at Boise State and NC State. Where do you put this Missouri program in regards to it's out there at the edges of SEC territory, and it's a difficult challenge to go in there and win?
Oh, well, it is. And there's no doubt about it, which has always led me to believe the job that Gary Pinkel did on such a consistent basis, particularly having some of the better defensive lines in the before the SEC and after getting in the SEC was also amazing. So I think Pinkel deserves a lot of credit for what he's done. I think that's a really good point right now. Missouri has had success as of late in, say, coming to Florida and winning in Gainesville. Matter of fact, they blew out Florida. So that's been a difficult matchup for the Gators. So that is another wait and see situation. I still think Missouri is a good job. I think it's a good recruiting area. But right and coming over and having success from App State, I could see him doing some pretty good things. But at this point, Mark, I don't see them getting anywhere close, certainly to Florida and Georgia, and right now, even Tennessee for that matter, probably, and Kentucky.
Talking SEC coaches rankings, Brent has given us his top 5. I'm running mine down from 14 to number 1. I land in Columbia, South Carolina, from Columbia, Missouri, and Will Muschamp at South Carolina. I think people forget that 2012 Florida team almost played for a national championship.
Yeah, sure did.
They played a very difficult game against Georgia, in which they dominated on defense, lost a turnover fest. Otherwise, they would have been in the SEC championship game in place of Georgia, and they had a tremendous team that took on one of the toughest schedules in the nation. But otherwise, obviously, a disappointing tenure at Florida. Comes to South Carolina. I had somebody ask me the other day, Brent, why does South Carolina not win in football? They're surrounded by all this talent, and despite Spurrier had the great 3-year run of 11-win seasons, but besides that, it's been difficult to win there. And Will Muschamp had that ascension of 3 wins to 6 to 9, but now we've seen that breakthrough not come, and if anything, there's been regression the last couple of years.
There really has, and Lou Holtz had a run there too during that time. And I'm with you; it's a mystery. I've been there, like I'm sure you have. I mean, the caboose, the passion there is unbelievable with that fan base. They've certainly proven they can win in basketball and also with baseball with Ray Tanner, who is their AD. We covered Will very closely, as you can imagine, here at Florida. And they had, and look, when he first came into coaching, he was the coach in waiting at Texas. People may forget that, but then Florida hired him. Jeremy Foley really believed in him, and it just didn't quite work out. But to me, the bugaboos for Will has always been, Will's a good, tough, hard-nosed football coach. I think he'll always have a job in some capacity, Mark, but the struggles he has are usually on offense. There are particularly times here at Florida, they would mix up plays, be going down the field very well, and then he would tell them, let's just run the ball. And that they lost a lot of momentum for that. Mike Bobo is there now, who is a friend for Will. That's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I think they've got a good quarterback in Liskey at this point that he can play well. But I'm with you. I think Will's probably where he is. The buyout this year has gone down from like $13 million to $20 million. Still a hunk of change, isn't it, Mark? And again, what I'm wondering is, on my last comment for Will, if they kind of have a mediocre season again, still, Mark, could the buyout and the struggles that schools are having with money, could that pardon the pun, but could that buy him another year?
Yeah. So you mentioned Jimbo Fisher in a big year at Texas A&M for him. I immediately turned in my mind to Will Muschamp at South Carolina. I got to think that he's got to show us something, and it's a difficult schedule. He always has to face, but he's being paid big money to turn that thing around and get it going at a certain level there at South Carolina. And again, the records would say he's hit a plateau, and this is a crossroads season for Muschamp in Columbia. Lane Kiffin at number 10, Brent. All eyes are going to be on the SEC Western Division with the power struggle at the top, but even the lower level teams, and I say that in quotations, with Ole Miss and Mississippi State, are going to be quite entertaining with Leach and Kiffin. What a unique coaching career this man has had. He's only 45 years old. He was an NFL head coach at 32. He coached major powers in his 30s at USC and Tennessee, and to be given those kind of jobs speaks to just the oddity of him not having necessarily the track record to back up getting those types of jobs, but at the same time that he has that type of charisma, personality, and salesmanship to gain those type of jobs.
I think Lane's a really good football coach, and if he does well at Ole Miss, let's say, Mark, they win 8, 9, maybe 10 games. By the end of that third year, I think he's got some big schools looking at him at that point. I'm with you. That's going to be fascinating. What Lane is better than anything else is he's a play caller. and he's going to give defense coordinators some headaches. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think Lane's a better play caller than he is a quarterback developer. But with Matt Corral and the Plumlee kid, that's going to be fascinating this year to see what they're going to be able to do. And again, Ole Miss, for their bugaboo, has been defense. If they can stop anybody at any time, I think that's going to be tremendous for them. But Kiffin is going to be a fascinating watch along with his counterpart in Starkville and Mike Leach over the next several years.
Nobody's stock is rising quite like Jeremy Pruitt's is based on down the stretch results in 2019, but more importantly, going forward, recruiting rankings. And he's bringing in quite the haul right now at Tennessee. This is, of course, his first head coaching job. So like we've seen with Kirby Smart, like we've seen with Mullen Muschamp at Florida, maybe he's taken a few hits. If we were doing these rankings in week 3 of the 2019 season after a loss to Georgia State and then that blown game against BYU, people would have all sorts of different things to say about this guy, Brent.
Well, listen, Pruitt's tremendous. He did a really good job. People found out about him when he was a high school coach. I've got a friend who actually put together the game. Do you remember when Hoover played Tim Tebow in Nice, and basically during the summer, this one I think probably been senior year for Tebow at Nice. A lot of people in that area found Jeremy Pruitt, and they were really impressed with him. Pruitt has done a really good job in his assistant everywhere that he's gone, Florida State, Alabama, and what he's been able to do in the SEC. Pruitt is kind of who he is. I mean, there's no flair. He's not going to quote poetry. He's not going to pull a rabbit out of a hat or do card tricks or anything like that. He's just a good old football coach who obviously they're the number 2 team right now in the recruiting rankings, and whoever you look at this point, they're going to have one of the better offensive lines in the league with Trey Smith coming back. I think Toa is tremendous defensive player. Now they're still, I think, 2 years away from where they need to be as far as a roster is concerned. But I'm telling you that they're an up and coming football team. And if people would just be patient and give him time, in about 2 more seasons, they very well will be up there with Florida and Georgia, but they're not going to be up there this year because they don't have the roster yet. But Jeremy's got incredible potential.
The antithesis of Butch Jones, his predecessor, salesman to, as you just said, just a football coach. Just right. Players, I'm going to go out and get them, then I'm going to coach them up. Just leave me alone. I don't want to talk to the media. I want to coach football. Yeah. Brent, the Auburn football program's intriguing to me. Not quite elite, but they jump out with these seasons like they did in 2004, 2010, almost pulled it off in 2017. So if you look at the entirety of Gus Malzahn's tenure at Auburn, it's not very impressive. A lot of 7 and 8 win seasons, although it started off with a bang with one of the great turnarounds in college football history and taking 0-8 to an SEC championship and within seconds of winning the whole thing. But otherwise, I'm looking at a 26 and 22 mark in the SEC since that magical 2013 season. I don't know what to say about Gus Malzahn. I expect more at Auburn.
Well, I think you said it well. And the reality of it is Gus Malzahn is not an elite football coach in this league. I mean, he's had some good teams. And to be honest with you, he's kept his job, in my opinion, because of being able to beat Nick Saban every few years, particularly at Auburn. And Kevin Steele, as defensive coordinator, was a gamble, but has turned out to be one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. I think the problem that Auburn's got, it's twofold. It's mainly on offense. Number one, for whatever reason, they cannot develop an offensive line. They're now just beginning to recruit what I would call would be SEC offensive linemen. And if you look at their recruiting right now, they've got several 6'5", 6'7" offensive linemen that they haven't had in a while. And the second thing is, with all this offensive guru stuff that is attributed to Gus. The reality is Gus is much better when they go up tempo. But for whatever reason, he just refuses to do it. Now he's hired Chad Morris to be able to call the plays. I think that's going to last maybe Mark, a game or two before Gus takes it over again. Now I think we both of us love Bo Nix and think Bo Nix is really going to be very good. But I think that's a lot of it. Auburn is, last year was typical of Gus Malzahn beating Alabama and Auburn, and also going to the bowl game against Minnesota and just simply not showing up. So, and that's not being disparaging against Minnesota, but they really didn't play well at all. They weren't ready to play. So I'm very much with you on this. And Mark, and you probably heard the same thing I have. And this is not from rival fans. This is from Auburn fans. A lot of Auburn fans wish Gus would have been gone 3 or 4 years ago. They don't particularly like Gus in a lot of ways. And look, some of that's not his fault. He's a quiet, reserved guy and rather be watching film than he would be anything else. Gus is just kind of Gus. For the media, he's not going to give you much, to be honest with you. But I think you hit it on the head. I think Auburn is I certainly think they're a level above your South Carolinas, but I still think they're a level below Alabama and Georgia and Florida and LSU at this point.
Yeah, interesting program there at Auburn, where again they jump up from time to time and challenge the elites, but largely disappointing for Gus Malzahn now coming into what would be a 8th season there at Auburn. So your 5B, Brent, turns into my number 7. I'm impressed with Mark Stoops as you are. Kentucky's been awful forever. They've been a laughing stock in the SEC. There's been a breath of life here and there with Hal Mummy and here and there, but generally a laughing stock. And what he did was exactly what you had pointed out, is that he decided, I can't slug it out with all those powerhouses to the south in the recruiting wars. Sure, I'm going to get the players that I can, but I'm going to own this state and I'm going to head north because they got some pretty good football players in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And he got the number 1 player out of Michigan this past recruiting cycle. He does it with defense. That was his calling card at Oklahoma. And it took him a while. It took him like 4 or 5 years to get to a bowl game, but he got it done. Actually, his 4th season, he got to a bowl game, but he's got a really good thing going there at Kentucky. And don't overlook Mark Stoops at number 7. Okay, Mike Leach. Everybody has to have an opinion on Mike Leach. I just look at what the guy has produced, and I don't even like his style. Yeah. So I'm not speaking out of generally admiration for his style, but the results. Brent, if I was going to tell you right now that there was going to be a coach at Texas Tech who was going to finish in the top 25 5 out of 6 years, you would think, oh, well, this guy's a tremendous coach to go there, because they're going 5-7 just about every year. But that was Mike Leach's run to conclude his stay at Texas Tech. Then he takes over a Washington State program that's going 2-10, 3-9 every year. Boom. He elevates them to serious contention for Pac-12 championships and finished in the top 10 his second to last year there. And, of course, we know the quirkiness and we know the air raid, and that he doesn't like to run the ball, and that's going to be an interesting fit in a big boy league in the SEC.
Well, when I think of Mike Leach, besides being entertaining, the thing that really comes to mind is I'm absolutely convinced that he could take you and me, even at our advanced age, according to our kids, and make us into an all-SEC quarterback. Look, he took Gardner Minshew coming from East Carolina, who was basically going to Alabama to hold the clipboard, and he was basically your Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year in his last year. He'll find a quarterback. He and Lane Kiffin are going to have some sleepless nights for SEC defensive coordinators, to say the least. I like the guy. He you never know quite what he's capable of doing. I've always thought, Mark, that Leach was a really good defensive coordinator away from being an elite football coach. Now, his roster is being shook up because when you go to a place in the beginning, you're just going to weed some guys out, but they will be patient with Leach, and they will allow him to do what he needs to do. I think he'll be successful there as Dan Mullen was over the course of time.
Mike Leach, first year at Mississippi State, should be intriguing. And, of course, an Egg Bowl matchup with Lane Kiffin, hopefully for years to come. All right, let's get to my top 5. Kirby Smart, as we talked about in running down your top 5 as well, has taken a top 10 to 15 program and made it elite. There are detractors that his in-game coaching isn't the best. He's made some questionable decisions. They didn't get it done against Alabama. But when you come that close to winning a national championship against Nick Saban, he basically, in regards to raising the program, reached it to national championship status.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And obviously Bama makes the change from Jalen Hurts to Tua, which was risky, but it certainly paid off. And Georgia has nothing to be ashamed of at all in that situation. So, and look, I still think it's important to win your divisional title, which he has done. And I'm with you. It just really, to me, it's still a matter of time until they're back in the playoffs.
Yeah, and then the next year they have the disappointment of being up by 2 touchdowns in the SEC title game to Alabama and blowing that. So I get it. He's got to get it done eventually. But, man, he's recruiting out of his mind. He's got a great program. 2020 is going to be fascinating with a change, hopefully, in offense for Georgia fans to see if they can really take off. At number 4, Brent, I've got Jimbo, Texas A&M. Great run at Florida State for the most part their national championship, 4 top 10 finishes. Recruiting, as we mentioned with Kirby Smart, similar to Texas A&M, he has raised the bar considerably. 2018, they took the progress you would have expected, but in 2019, maybe regressed. But if you consider the schedule, there's just that gap there. They're not playing with Alabama, LSU, those teams over the past 2 years, and that's what they've got to get done. We know that they're going to be good and that they're talented, and I put it right down here in my notes, something you brought up. He's almost like a Steve Spurrier in dealing with these quarterbacks. It's fascinating and it's tremendous because he knows so much, but he can get in his way at times as well.
Well, and that I think is the key to the season. Does Kellen Mond take the steps that we think he will in order to be an elite quarterback in the league, or will he pretty much stay at the level that he is? I think Jimbo can get him up further, and with the offense he's got around him as far as the skill positions, I think that bodes well for Kellen Mond. But Mark, really in a nutshell, that's really going to determine the season for both Jimbo and Mond, is it not?
All right, we get to my top 3 here, and this is where folks are going to take shots at me. Not Ogeron at 2. I've got Ogeron at 3. Of course, he's won a national championship, and it's easy to stack up the coaches based on national championships and not have to defend yourself. But I still want to see it beyond 2019 and the Burrow and Brady factor. Done a great job. He's obviously learned from his experiences at Ole Miss. He could have kept the job at USC, did a decent enough job, and they probably wish they would have gone a different direction and decided to keep him around. Ed Ogeron, again, just a tremendous fit, not just a tremendous coach, but it seems to be the right fit at LSU, and I just need to see it play out. But number 3 in the SEC ain't too shabby.
Oh.
Yeah, Brent, I really like Dan Mullen. I really like what he's doing at Florida. From a roster standpoint, you pointed it out that he's cut a 35-point gap against Georgia to about 19 points and then a touchdown last year. And they still may not have the roster to get it done, but they're going to have a puncher's chance, probably a 30 to 40% chance of getting it done against Georgia. And that's probably going to decide the division. But that program has been floundering since Urban Meyer stepped off campus, and he's produced 2 top 10 teams the last 2 years.
I've really been impressed with what he's been able to do. He's got supreme confidence, and he really has galvanized the fan base, giving them a lot of hope. What he's been able to do with Kyle Trask, to me, sums up who Mullen is. Felipe Franks gets hurt. He puts Trask in, and Trask just really became a star by the end of the year in what he was able to do. Todd Grantham's done a good job defensively with them. But again, Mark, as you know, and you alluded to it, it comes down to beating Georgia. If they can beat Georgia here in Jacksonville, that puts them on another level and probably very likely sends them back to Atlanta.
And to conclude the rankings, you had him at number 1. I have him at number 1. Everyone should have him at number 1. The only question is he the greatest of all time?
Well, I think you can make the argument that with what he's done in terms of championships and draft choices, whatever stats you want to throw out there, I think he very well could do it. And I'll be honest with you, Mark, I think he stays in Tuscaloosa another handful of years. I don't think he's in a hurry to go anywhere. He gets a lot of energy out of recruiting elite athletes. I think he has got a schedule this year that is in his favor, and I can very easily see them coming back and winning the West, going to Atlanta, and ended up again playing for another national championship before the year's over.
And Brent, you'll get this comment. I don't know if a lot of people out there will. I don't know that LSU shouldn't still be sending him a paycheck.
Yes.
We assume that LSU is an elite program, and they are an elite program. But throughout the late 70s, throughout the 80s, the 90s, until Nick Saban stepped on campus, they would jump up and have a really nice season every 6-8 years, have a 10-win season. But generally, they were winning not much over 50% of their games. I cut a video not too long ago looking at where the elites have been down in their history. They went through like a 9-year run in the SEC where they went 18 games under 500 in the 80s and 90s. That program was not a great program, not even a good program before Nick Saban, and he set the standard. He put them on the right course, and they haven't been derailed since. I know that they have underachieved, but they've brought in NFL-type talent ever since.
I think what he did at LSU is he showed them what they can do. And as you mentioned, they went through the likes of Curly Holman, who I still think is a decent football coach. It just didn't work at LSU. And obviously other coaches, here's a great thing about a guy like Saban. Let's just say he leaves Alabama after 2020, which a lot of rival coaches will love. But see, here's the thing is, whoever would come into Alabama afterwards, the coach could win another national championship a year or two after he leaves because of the talent that still remains in Alabama.
And what I would think would be the experiment of experiments, and it will never happen, of course. Once I spit this out, we'll all know why, that we could send Nick Saban off to Oregon State, bring Urban Meyer out of retirement, send him to Kansas, make those kind of matchups. I would just be fascinated to see how quickly the turnaround would come and to what extent. Would be fascinating.
Yeah, it really would. They would improve recruiting and facilities and competitiveness very quickly.
SEC coaches rankings. We got Brent's top 5 and mine as well. Brent, we appreciate you dropping the knowledge.
Absolutely, Mark. Always great to be with you, my friend. And again, a happy birthday week to you, my friend.